Well, thank you for hosting me. And I think that one might begin with the famous epigram that was already created in 1849 by the famous Carr, saying that plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more it changes, the more it's the same thing. This is in fact what's happening in Lebanon today. Nothing has changed dramatically since the 19th century, since the mid 19th century, and the sectarian tensions are already there, and they have already been there since then. We are today at the eve of a conference in Paris, and that is to be held tomorrow by France, the sponsor country, the country that has a very soft spot for Lebanon. And more than 40 representatives from all over the world will be participating in this conference. Basically, they are looking for donations and to try to raise $300 million in order to help the Lebanese survive. In fact, those $350 million will be barely enough for 2 or 3 months of subsidies in Lebanon. And this will not solve the problem. In any case, it has to be linked with the direct assistance to the people and not through the government, because the government and the people of the government are all corrupt, and this money will never get to the Lebanese. What are the chances of such a conference to bring any change in Lebanon? In my view, there's no chance. There's nothing likely to change, because basically the sectarian construction of the political body in Lebanon has not changed. Prime Minister designate Najib Mikati has proposed a new formula of 24 ministers, divided in 8 for the Ba'abda group, 8 for the Shia, and 8 for the Sunni group. And this proposal is unacceptable for the Christians, because in the Diab government there are 12 ministers who are Christians, whereas in this one there will be only 8. On the other hand, the Sunnis, who had only 4 representatives in the Diab, will have 6. And this is, of course, unacceptable. And this will lead definitely to another paralysis. And if things will not change, and they will not change, it's more likely to hear that Mr. Mikati has resigned his task, and he has left his efforts, because nothing will be achieved this way. So we are in a deadlock in Lebanon, and in my view, the only solution for that is, if we look around us at the Kosovo crisis at the time and Libya crisis at the time, the international community has to mobilize and to take over or at least to assist the Lebanese government as direct assistance, and leave the Lebanese government aside. And this has to be taken for at least 3 to 5 years. That will allow the international community to initiate reforms, economic and political. Otherwise, we are doomed to a situation where this country will fall into petty areas, the Maronite enclave, the Sunnite enclaves, the Shiite enclaves, and in this way, I mean, this will only lead to an external intervention, and this external intervention is dramatic. It will dramatically change the situation. It is, of course, we're talking about Iran, because this is the only player right now who will be winning if this country comes to a failure. I believe that we are talking about this development and what will be the impact on Israel. I believe that if the Lebanese government or the Lebanese state falls apart, as it is actually going onto this itinerary, I think that the only ones who will be the winners are Hezbollah, because economically, financially, they are best organized, and they are assisted by Iran, who just sends millions of dollars to Hezbollah, and Hezbollah has already created a parallel state, and it will take no time for Hezbollah to take over if such an instruction is given by Tehran. In that case, I think that Israel will face a different Lebanon and will have to reassess its position concerning what would be the outcome of any confrontation with Hezbollah. Because then this is not only Hezbollah we're talking about a common front between Iran, Hezbollah, and all the militias that are right now in Syria, 80,000 of them, and that can join very quickly the effort of Hezbollah against Israel. So this is a new situation, and the Israeli leadership has to think over and say, okay, what are the options for Israel? Would it be to open the borders right now, the Fatma, the gate as it was in the past, and open for assistance? I think this is something to do and not to wait for any permission from the Lebanese. I think that Israel would try to re-cement its contacts with the northern part of the country, because we cannot afford being overwhelmed by Hezbollah without having the opportunity to overcome or to just circumvent Hezbollah. We are not facing we are facing, in fact, a grim situation, a dire situation, and this could degenerate very quickly in our border. I don't see it for tomorrow, because right now Hezbollah is much worried with its rear. I think that there's much to consolidate, and certainly the events of the last 2 days only illustrate that Hezbollah also is under attack. You know, the Sunni militias just attacked a convoy of Hezbollah supporters and killed 5 of those the combatants only 2 days ago. And the situation is very, very tense all over Lebanon, certainly in Tripoli, certainly in North Lebanon. And we are, in a way, we are at the brink of a total disaster, whereas the scepter of a civil war can very easily come back. And, you know, since Lebanon has lived for almost 25 years with this civil war, I think that we are open for another round.
You mentioned Najib Mikati and the fact that he has no chance, basically, to save the Lebanese people from whatever it is that they're expecting. So why take on this role in the first place, Jacques?
Okay. Najib Mikati expressed himself yesterday. He said that he hoped that by the August the 4th, I mean the anniversary of the explosion in Beyרות, he would be able to form a government. Well, it seems that this is not the case. As I said, he has proposed a formula which is unacceptable to Michel Aoun. Since it talks about reduction of the presence of Christian ministers from 12 to 8, so which is something unacceptable. And moreover, Michel Aoun has asked, as he asked at the time Hassan Diab and of course Saad Hariri, to have a veto on the government, and allowing him to have a third of the votes, and in fact to just manipulate the government. And this is against the constitution. Lebanon, the constitution talks about that the prime minister has to hold negotiations, not negotiation, but he has to inform the president of the formation of the government, and the president has to agree or not. And here we find that Michel Aoun is opposed, because he wants 2 major portfolio for himself. One is the justice, and second is interior. Why is this? Why is it so? Because elections are next year for parliament and for the president. He wants to assure that the 2 ministers will allow him to manipulate and control the elections. So facing this situation right now, we are again in deadlock, again in impasse. And I don't think that, as my colleague here said, that Najib Mikati stands any chance to form a government in the near future.
Thank you very much. Chris, you had a question?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. First, for Elisheva, how do you explain the relationship between Michel Aoun and Hezbollah? And a question for Jacques, how likely do you see it that Hezbollah could take over Lebanon?
And I'll ask that Jacques answers first, as
Okay.
Jacques' time is limited.
In 2008, Hezbollah took over Beirut and the national institutions in less than 3 days. I mean, just occupied the whole scene, and it was under, of course, the instructions of Tehran. Basically, militarily, I don't think that Hezbollah has a problem to take over the country. I'm not talking the country, sorry. I'm talking about Beirut and the national institutions of the Lebanese government. Because the northern part of Lebanon, the Christian enclave, would be a bit more difficult, and certainly the Sunni area of Tripoli and the north of the Bekaa is also an area where Hezbollah cannot act freely. Hezbollah can act freely in Beirut and south of Beirut till the Israeli border. So in this, by controlling the government and the institutions, I think this is the way Hezbollah can influence, and this is possible in case we arrive to a deadlock, and this deadlock is, Lebanon has been always a land of miracles. Well, you don't know why, and it still goes on and goes on and goes on. Hassan Diab can still be the prime minister, the caretaker, for as long as it takes till the elections next year. So this is on the one hand, but and certainly Hezbollah will not act if Hezbollah is not hurt. And at this moment, Hezbollah, is trying to consolidate his positions because he is being attacked for the first time in Lebanon by the Lebanese, who are blaming his conduct and his hegemony, bringing Iran into Lebanon, and it is the center of criticism. And for the first time, we've seen Hassan Nasrallah being hung on the gallows in the Place de Canon, Place des Martyrs in Beirut, which is quite unusual, and I say in the Lebanese political scene. To sum up, I say that Hezbollah militarily, potentially, can take over the place if a decision is made by Tehran, and if Tehran judges that the time is opportune for Hezbollah to take over. Hezbollah will not act on its own because it has no real decision power. The decision lays in Tehran, in Khamenei, personally, and certainly with his representative, who are all the time counseling Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut.
Thank you very much. Pierre, you had a question?
Jacques mentioned the questions about the Paris conference tomorrow, that sending money to Lebanon doesn't help because it will not arrive at the right places. What could the West do? Should they take over the Lebanon, responsibility for the Lebanon? What scenario do you suggest?
The question is for me, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. In my view, the decision has to be made at the Security Council, deciding that to nominate a sort of a high commissioner, like the events in Kosovo, like in Libya, and say to the Lebanese gentlemen, you are unable to run your country. You have 6 million people that are going to starve in 12 months to come. You have 1.5 million refugees from Syria who have nothing to eat. And this is we are going to a humanitarian catastrophe. And this High Commissioner will be, in fact, dominating Israel, the Lebanese politics, and he will decide how to conduct the country and how to reform the country. And this is a sort of takeover because they have proved to be incapable to run the country. I mean, right now the EU and together with France have already formulated sanctions against the Lebanese politicians. Money has been frozen in several accounts. Imagine in a period of less than 4 months, more than $10 billion just fled from Lebanon into the Swiss account and the European accounts and others. The Lebanese, the governor of the Bank of Lebanon himself is under scrutiny. So I mean, this is a country that really is corrupt. And who is also, I mean, there's a joke right now running in Lebanon. If you're a thief, you go to a jail, and if you're a politician, you get nominated as prime minister. So this is what the Lebanese think, and I think that the only solution is taking over. By that also allowing this this high commissioner to have a very, say, a military force that he could activate, maybe UNIFIL plus, not UNIFIL as it is today, but as you know, NATO at the time operated in Kosovo, and in this way, I think that we're even ready to face Hezbollah. And this is the only way that Lebanon can get out of its of the abyss. And I believe that this is the only solution that is viable right now. Otherwise, we just drag our feet and we'll see more of the same and more of the same. And, you know, the Lebanese pound, who began its career in October 2019 at 1,509 Lebanese pound for a dollar. Now it's 23,500, and maybe only yesterday was a little bit less because people thought that Mikati was able to form a government. This is the way people who had $500 as a salary have now realize that they have to live with $37 instead of $500. This is the situation in Lebanon. 50% of the population are under the poverty line, and 25% are extreme poverty line. So there's no way that the present government can save its own population.
Can I have a follow-up question?
Go ahead.
What would be the reaction of Tehran if the West would take over Lebanon?
Well, you know, as I said, the West has to be ready to confront Tehran. Tehran, in fact, I mean, right now is behind the scenes. It's not. I mean, it hasn't come up outside and say, okay, we are here, we are present. They're trying to use Hezbollah as a shield and as a facade. So using that, I mean, the game is very, I would say, very difficult to play, but it is possible. And by helping, you know, the 2/3 of the population being under this high commissioner, Hezbollah find himself also. I mean, that he has to bow and accept the situation. Maybe, I mean, we are not talking right now of disarming Hezbollah, because Hezbollah certainly, if such a decision is reached, Hezbollah will fight back. Definitely, he will not give up his weapons, because as he thinks he is the resistance facing Israel, the resistance facing the Sunnite in Syria, in Baghdad and other places. He won't give up his weapons, and this is the main stumbling point between on this agenda. Is Hezbollah ready to cooperate with the foreign high commissioner, or is he ready to fight? And I believe that if the West proves to be proves steadfastness, I think that Hezbollah will bow.
Thank you very much.
If I may, I would like to emphasize the point. The Christians in Lebanon have always looked for an outside sponsor. 1840, it was the Egyptians. 1860, it was the French. 1958, the Americans. And then 1982, Israel. So they're always looking for somebody from outside to assist them. Michel Aoun, unlike all the other politicians, ideologically believes that his alliance with Hezbollah will help saving the Christians in Lebanon. And this is why this is the way to analyze his behavior with Hezbollah, and the way this alliance, which has been signed in a church in Jamaiz in Beyרות, has survived 15 years till now.
Thank you very much. We have another question from Arya Khan English. What preparations are the sectarian groups making to fight a civil war? And is Israel involved?
Well, I beg to differ a little bit. I mean, the north of the country, certainly Tripoli, is out of control. Tripoli streets are with the militias, Sunnite militias, fighting the Shiite suburb. And this is an area that even the army is not even trying to enter. I mean, they are at the outskirts of the city, and the city lives by itself. The same goes in the Khaldi area, south of the Dakhya, the area of where Hezbollah has his headquarters. Only 2 days ago, I mean, there are very potent Sunnite tribes in the area of Khaldi, south of the Dakhya. And this is an open book. I mean, they have only to look at what's going on in Lebanon, see that militias are on the ground, and Hezbollah is fighting back tick for tack in this field. Another area that is problematic is the Druze area, where the Druze area in Mount Lebanon, certainly in the Shuf area, where some incidents have been recorded. Basically, we are not talking right now of a whole civil war like 1975, but I would say that the sources or the roots are here, and it will not take too much in order to degenerate into an open war between several militias. Samir Jaja, the head of the Lebanese forces, had been accused that to try to reorganize the Lebanese forces who were dissolved at the time. Hezbollah has no problem in mobilizing its 70,000 combatants, militants, and right now the Druze have they're all, you know, they're armed to and ready for any confrontation. So the only ones who are not very much ready for a civil war are certainly the Sunnites in the northern part of the country. Now, what are the chances of this to happen? As I said, you know, in 1975, it took only a bus to be fired at in Ain Romani just to begin the war that lasted 25 years.
However, history doesn't always, I think, repeat itself exactly in the same way. I also think that the example of civil war in Syria and, of course, the influx of Syrians, refugees into Lebanon, and how that, of course, has a very difficult impact on Lebanese economy. I think alongside all these examples that Dr. Nirya is mentioning, I do think that, again, the example of Syria and also the example of the Lebanese Civil War and the scars of the Lebanese Civil War of 1975-1990 can also maybe create a barrier from a similar occurrence today in Lebanon.
Yeah, specifically for that, you know, in the second civil war, 1975, in 1976, it was the Lebanese president who asked for the Syrian Hafiz Assad to intervene and send his forces in order to protect the Christians from the Palestinians and from the leftist organizations. Now there's no Syria to intervene. There's no Syrian forces to come into Lebanon. The only one that can come and help are the Hezbollah and certainly Iran.
Thank you very much. We would have time for one last question. Anybody? If not, then I'll be the one asking it. You've mentioned the refugees from Syria, and I'm wondering how probable it is for a wave of Lebanese citizens seeking refuge on the Israeli border, and how is Israel preparing, if at all? Any of you?
Well, I'm not. I don't specialize in Israel.
Okay.
However, I would say that I think we could expect an influx of refugees, of course, towards Europe. And if we talk about the border of Israel, you know, Israel assisted providing health care for Syrian refugees. So I think there may be some refugees on the border, but it's hard for me to believe that they will choose to try to get into Israel and not to Europe.
Allow me to draw a parallel. In 1976, it was the Lebanese president, Nirya who asked Israel to allow the then Major Haddad, Saad Haddad, to come with another Joseph Shidiak, two officers, and to run the area in order to assist the Christians in the area. So I think at the time there was, and then it was again the Lebanese president who was asked about who would come after Saad Haddad, who died, and he sent Antoine Lahad as the General Antoine Lahad. So I believe that confronting the situation in Lebanon, there's no way Israel has to communicate with the Lebanese government through third parties, whatever. I mean, and then just remember, Michel Aoun was the one who just shook hands with the General Aynan in the LA area in 1982. So he knows us very well. He knows us from the fact that he was the commander of the 8th Brigade. The 8th Brigade was at the south of Lebanon, and I believe that this has to be the Lebanese are not interested. The Lebanese themselves are not interested that the Syrian refugees come through their territory, certainly through Hezbollah territory, and come to the border. This will not happen. This will not, the Hezbollah and certainly all the others will not allow them to move from where they are in the refugee camps in the northern part of the country. And I think that this is the only way that they will cope with the issue.
Thank you so much. We're going to end this here.